Hello everyone, my name is Michael Pugliese. I am the CEO and the owner of Circadia by Dr. Pugliese. Today we're going to be demonstrating for you the Coco Enzyme Oxygen treatment. Now oxygen is great for a number of skin conditions and skin concerns. Primarily we focus on the treatment of acne and rosacea with our oxygen treatment because they both contain a vascular etiology but also a bacterial content as well, and that's really what oxygen is most beneficial for, is helping to control bacterial content in the skin and also vascularity. It works as a vasoconstrictor and it helps to kill both anaerobic bacteria that's on the surface of the skin and deep inside the follicle as well. Now our oxygen treatment is a little bit different than some of the others that you may have heard of or experienced on the market. You'll see that as we move through the treatment protocol. We're not using any pressurized gas tanks. We're not using any hydrogen peroxide. We're actually using what's referred to as a solid state oxygen of magnesium peroxide, which allows us to create oxygen in situ or on the surface of the skin, which also allows us to measure just how much oxygen is penetrating into the skin. So it's one of the key features and key benefits. One of the drawbacks that we see with oxygen is that it's also classified as a free radical. As critical as it is to skin health and the health of the body overall, is that it can also generate free radical stress. It's actually considered to be a diradical as well. So we don't want really prolonged exposure to it. So part of our treatment system allows us to neutralize the amount of time that we have the oxygen on the surface of the skin, which allows for a safe delivery and a safe application. Now as we move through the protocol, you'll see that we have a number of different steps, mist that we're applying for the conversion to oxygen, the neutralizing, and then ultimately a pH balancing after we move through the individual steps. As part of the prep, we're going to be using our Coco enzyme. The Coco enzyme is a combination of 3 different enzymes. We use bromelain, which comes from pineapple, papain, which comes from papaya. We use trypsin, which is a pancreatic enzyme, but we don't use any animal byproducts in the Circadia range, so we use a bacterial engineered source, which is quite highly marketable to the consumer. Most customers and consumers are looking for animal-friendly, cruelty-free sources of products, so it's just something that we see as a little bit more marketable and obviously something that's a little bit more beneficial for our clients and consumers. I have here with me Caitlin Macy, who is going to be administering the treatment, and we have Ashley, who is our lovely model here. She has beautiful skin already, but no problematic skin issues, but again, this is more for a congested skin type, for acne, especially those who have a lot of extractions that are necessary. It really helps to loosen up the surface of the skin protein so that if we do have to do our extractions, it makes getting those microcomedones out much easier. And again, if we have the rosacea, diffused redness, it'll help to shrink down a lot of that visible redness that you see in those clients' skin. So as far as the frequency goes, when it comes to applying the treatment, what we really would like to see initially is a series of these treatments that's safe enough to be done once a week. However, about once a month is where we want to get that regularity. If you've got a relatively severe condition of either acne, rosacea, we want to see them coming back about once a week until we can kind of get it under control. Then we can review exactly where we are with that client and then have them coming back for about once a week of maintenance. So let's go ahead and get started with our initial portion of the protocol, which is our cleansing step. Now for the cleansing, we have a couple different options. Typically we use the lipid replacing cleansing gel. It is a foaming cleanser. We're using a blend of sulfate-free surfactants, very gentle to the skin. There's no sulfates here, there's no manual exfoliants, although we do have additional option, which is our micro exfoliating honey cleanser, also sulfate free, but it gives a little bit more of that manual abrasion that you're looking for without being overly aggressive. The manual material that we use, of course, is the beeswax, not so rigid that it's going to tear into the skin the way some of the more abrasive materials available on the market are capable of doing. However, it will help to remove those dead skin cells the way we want a quote scrub to be able to do. So Caitlin's going to be using just some wet 4x4s here to remove the excess cleanser. And if you have a client that's coming in with a heavy amount of makeup, we can also use our vitamin veil cleanser, which is an oil base, to really help to cut that oil. But we did a little bit of cleansing prior to the filming here with Ashley so that she didn't have to use the vitamin veil as the pre-treatment cleanse just yet. Now, next step in the protocol, we're going to be applying the Coco Enzyme. Now, our Coco Enzyme we have in two different steps. It comes in both a powder and then also an activating solution. And the reason why we keep them out of solution, we don't pre-mix them prior to the treatment during the production and manufacturing process, because each enzyme is proteolytic, meaning that it's protein. Well, the enzymes themselves are also proteins. So if we pre-mix them prior to the treatment and put them in a package, well, we'll start to see a decrease in what we call specific activity. Specific activity is really how we measure the overall strength in enzymes. When we measure the strength of acids, we're measuring them in pH, but if we pre-mix them, we start to see the efficacy of them over time decrease significantly. But if we pre-mix immediately prior to the treatment, both of them together, that treatment is going to be consistent and active each and every individual time. Now, we also have, in addition to the three enzymes that I mentioned, a Hershey's cocoa powder, which adds an element of anti-inflammatory activity. Cocoa powder, the benefits are widely known as anti-inflammatory, also antimicrobial, so it only adds to the benefit for that clientele that's looking for an anti-acne, anti-rosacea benefit. And it really helps to calm the overall skin down. Plus, it gives this beautiful aroma of chocolate in the treatment room, and who doesn't like the smell of chocolate? Now, typically we'll allow this to sit on the skin for the first time that the client's coming in, about 5 minutes or so. Depending on how frequently we're doing this treatment, we can go as high as 12 minutes. But the enzymes are relatively active, so the client may experience just a little bit of a tingling sensation from that initial application. Some may not experience it at all. Typically, those that already have a compromised skin type will feel it a bit more. However, it's not extremely uncomfortable. It's more just kind of a mild picking sensation, if anything at all. When it comes to the enzyme activity, one of the keys is keeping it moist. We want to make sure that the enzymes stay wet. If they have a tendency to dry out, not only is it difficult to remove the product, but then we're going to lose the activity as well. So keeping them moist is absolutely critical to making sure that the treatment turns out into the most benefit. Now, what we prefer to use is a moist towel. You can either use a steamer or a warm towel. You don't want to use too much heat, again, if we're working with a more inflamed rosacea condition, but you do want to use a little bit something that's tepid. Tepid water seems to be the most effective. However, if you have too much heat, it can create some problems. The steamer is also something that's nice to use. Unfortunately, if you have steam that's hitting the surface of the face on one side, unfortunately, steamers aren't exactly perfect for getting even distribution of moisture across the skin. You may find that the heat, because it accelerates the activity enzyme, it's going to be a little bit more active on one side. So my recommendation is always to use the warm towel. If you want to incorporate the use of a steamer, wrap it with a towel and then put the steam over the top. Now, when it comes to the removal of the product, you'll see that Caitlin applied the gauze first. The enzymes can have a tendency to get kind of caught up into the towels. So by applying the gauze first to the surface of the skin, or the cotton 4x4s, whatever it is that you choose to use, it helps to keep the towels from getting too messy. Now, Caitlin's just going to take some wet cotton 4x4s here and just remove the excess product. And really keeping a close eye and being diligent in removing that product from around the hairline, the corners of the nose. If you've got a client who has a little bit deeper lines and wrinkles or folds in the surface of the skin, where expression lines typically form around the surface of around the eyes, forehead, nasolabial folds, vertical lines around the mouth. Just make sure it's a little bit more diligent. Also in the corners of the nose as well. Now keep in mind, when it comes to the protocol, we want to stick almost exclusively with an enzyme. We do have two other enzyme options that are available. We have a raspberry and a citrus. All three of them have different levels of specific activity. The cocoa is a little bit more conservative. Again, because it has the cocoa's Hershey powder in it, it's a little bit more conservative. It's the most gentle of the three. The raspberry is a little bit more active, has a concentration of azelaic acid. Raspberry is naturally high in azelaic acid, which is very effective for treating hyperpigmentation. And the citrus has the highest specific activity, best for a more hyperkeratinized skin type. We do have protocols that will allow for the application of those two enzymes in conjunction with the oxygen, but almost always the go-to is going to be the cocoa, because it does just give a nice overall look and appearance to the skin, because almost always we're dealing with a more sensitive clientele with this particular treatment and protocol. Now, we're ready to apply the multiple steps for the oxygen treatment. And when you look inside the oxygen kit, what you'll see is 6 gel bases and also 6 individual powders. The protocol states that we are going to apply one of the gel bases inside a mixing bowl, and then we're going to apply one of the one of the powder vials inside with the gel base. And we want to start to mix this gently because the powder is relatively light, and then once we have it folded completely into the gel, then we can start to mix it relatively vigorously. And you'll see in a very short period of time that it's going to begin to bubble up significantly. Okay, it really starts to get that nice frothy meringue consistency to it. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can apply. Caitlin's going to be using a brush. Some of our clients will prefer to use either a spatula or just simply apply it with the hands. But the brush seems to work very well, helps to control the distribution of the product pretty easily. And again, the client may experience a little bit of a warming sensation, a little bit of tingling here. You just have to continue to check in with the client, make sure that they're not experiencing any level of discomfort. Oftentimes, if you have a more severe case of subtype 2 papulopustular rosacea, where you're going to have a lot more papules and pustules present, or more of a grade 3 type of acne where they have much more inflammatory lesions, maybe even some open lesions as well, where they've been doing some home extractions, they may have a tendency to feel the treatment a little bit more significantly. However, for the most part, if the client doesn't have as severe of a condition, again, they're not going to feel too much intense of a sensation. Now, what Caitlin's doing here is she's doing some very light manipulations. You don't even want to call it a massage. It's just gently manipulating the product around on the surface of the skin. And what that's allowing to do is to get this mixture of the magnesium peroxide and the gel base to penetrate just a little bit deeper into the skin. And that's important because the next step that we're going to apply is the enzyme that converts this material to oxygen and water into the skin. So we do want to allow this to rest on the skin for a little while. That light massaging allows it to penetrate a little bit deeper, so we have a bit more of a direct delivery into the oxygen. As soon as we convert this material, yes, a certain amount is going to immediately rise up into the atmosphere, but it does also penetrate deep into the follicle as well. And that's where it's most effective to help to control that bacterial content. Now here, Caitlin's going to be applying step number 2, and this is the mist. And what you'll notice, as soon as she applies the mist and begins to massage the skin once again, the mixture that's already there will kind of froth and foam up a little bit. And that's the action of converting that material once again to oxygen and water on the surface of the skin. And this step is going to last about 2 minutes. And again, you can see here she's not doing any kind of aggressive massaging. She's really just kind of gently manipulating the product around on the surface of the skin. Now, once we have that 2 minutes, Again, we don't want any kind of prolonged exposure to oxygen. As I mentioned, it is considered to be a free radical, so we want to keep our time limit relatively small. A more advanced protocol, we can leave it on just a bit longer, but we want to require at least a few treatments with the client's skin before we know how they're going to respond to the treatment, and then we can go a little bit longer. Typically, about as long as 5 minutes is how long we want to leave this particular portion of the treatment on. Now, she just applied step number 3, which allows for the neutralizing of the oxygen that's already on the skin. It does contain a relatively high level of a sodium bicarb solution, which doubles very nicely as a saponifier for sebum that's now in the follicle, which does 2 things for us. 1, it controls that oxygen activity, so it shuts that down. 2, because we've just done an exfoliation with an enzyme, that material is going to soak inside the follicle. It's also going to liquefy that sebum deep inside the follicle. So again, if we have any microcomedones present, this is going to help with the extraction process. By simply removing those surface proteins, then applying this step, any kind of extractions are going to be much, much easier. It's going to be much more comfortable for the client, and the larger the comedones, the easier they come out. And you may find that if you do have someone that has a large amount of microcomedones and they're pretty widely distributed across the zygoma, across the nose, just that light manipulation on the surface of the skin is going to allow them to come out and be removed relatively easily. Now, for the removal process, again, there's different protocols that are here. Our initial development of this step, we worked with an esthetician who helped us to develop this portion, and we're using the end of a spatula. You can use a wooden spatula, a plastic spatula, but what this does is it helps to do 2 things. 1, it'll push a lot of that congested material inside the follicle out. It also helps to remove a lot of that buildup of that surface protein. So by using the enzyme, it's just kind of very gently, almost a dermal plane. There's not a sharp edge here, but almost like a dermal plane action, really helping to get rid of that buildup that's there on the surface of the skin. Now we're going to apply another application of step number 3, just ensuring that we've neutralized all the oxygen that's currently on the surface of the skin. Now at this time, you really want to take a close look and see, are there any extractions to do? If there's some extractions, this is definitely a time to do it. You can also do them prior to the oxygen, just after the enzyme treatment. If you can look and see, hey, we've got a couple here that are definitely ready to come out to the surface, you can do them then. However, in between step 3 and step number 4, which is the final step of the oxygen treatment that comes in the kit, this is the ideal time. Now, because that step number 3 does have a sodium bicarb solution, it has a tendency to raise the pH of the skin relatively high. So our step number 4 will actually bring the pH of the skin right back down to about a 4.5 range, which is part of normal healthy skin, between 4.5 and 5.5. So that is our last portion that comes within the oxygen kit. Everything that we've discussed and gone over each individual step comes as part of the oxygen treatment, and then we have a number of finishing steps that we'll go over that are separate from what we've discussed so far. Now, the next finishing product is going to be the vitamin C reversal serum. Now, not only is this an amazingly stable form of vitamin C and magnesium ascorbyl phosphate, it's also in a hyaluronic acid base, and this is going to absorb very quickly into the surface of the skin. Again, especially because we've done so much exfoliation here, we've literally liquefied a lot of the sebum inside the follicle, so this stuff is going to go directly into the skin almost like a shot, and you can see just how quickly it absorbs. Again, we want to make sure that if you're performing this protocol, that you are using the vitamin C from Circadia. It is a magnesium ascorbyl phosphate base. We would not recommend utilizing another form of vitamin C, especially a high concentration of an ascorbic acid. It can be a little bit uncomfortable after this particular type of exfoliative treatment. Now, the next product is going to be the post peel, We're applying the post peel because, again, we want to make sure that we're helping to replace some of the level of hydration that we've just removed from the skin, again, pushing all that sebaceous gunk that's stuck inside the follicle out. And this is a blend of things like squalane butter, meadow foam butter, royal jelly, so a number of great recovery products that we can put here to help to maintain the level of hydration in the skin. And then the final step, of course, to maintain the overall protection is our Light Day Sunscreen SPF 37. It is a broad spectrum protectant, helps to protect against both UVB and UVA rays, but it's also environmental protection product. We've got some next generation antioxidants here that we're utilizing, helps to protect against multiple groups of free radicals, things like reactive oxygen species, reactive nitrogen, reactive carbonyl, a lot of the nasty things that are produced both by the body and that we're confronted with through environmental daily stressors as well. And you are all finished. How does it feel?
Amazing.
Wonderful.
Great. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much. It looks fantastic.
Thank you.